Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Family Meal Podcast. My name is Grace. Thank you so much for tuning in. For today's episode, we're going to expand off of an idea that we talked about a little bit in the last episode, which was an interview with my mother, who's an executive chef. If you haven't listened to that episode, please go check it out. It's a lot of fun. We have a great conversation. But we're going to be talking about restaurants and their supply chains. We're going to talk about it broadly, and then we're going to dig into how it's changed because of COVID. I think you already know where this is going, but we're going to dive into it. I'm going to let you know some tricks of the trade on the inside. So, restaurants have many different distributors who they get their ingredients from, right? So you probably have someone who gives you most of your produce, probably someone who brings you fish, another place where you get meat. You could have all different distributors for all different kinds of things, including sometimes, I don't want to use the term pre-made things, but we'll say that they're products that aren't quite raw ingredients, right? So this includes things like bread from a bakery, or maybe some kinds of desserts like ice creams or gelatos or things like that. So they're not quite raw ingredients. Plenty of chefs take those and don't just serve them as is. They do something special with them, but there's plenty of places that serve these kind of on their own practically finished products that you can buy and then sell at your restaurant and put on your menu. The main example we're going to be using today is going to be bread. Welcome to the bread bank. We got bread on deck, bread on the floor. As many of you who probably attempted a sourdough starter during quarantine know, how did those work out for you? Bread is pretty labor intensive to make on a whole, right? So if you're not prepared as a bakery to make big quantities of bread, it takes a lot of work to do, okay? So let's say at a given restaurant, your max capacity is like 60 people, okay? And you probably have 60 people-ish for dinner and maybe 30 people-ish for lunch. So you need roughly 90 bread rolls, which is about 8 dozen rolls. Let's put it in baker terms. You need 8 dozen rolls, right? 8 dozen rolls, so that means you have to make the dough for that, which, okay, that doesn't take that long, but then you got to let it rise, probably, for 2 hours, okay? Or maybe even overnight, depends on the type of bread. So so that's 2 hours of labor there that you just can't do anything with it. You can't produce anything during those 2 hours, you just have to let it rise. Then you got to shape it, which, again, takes a long time to shape 90 rolls. It's not that long, but when it's that kind of quantity, it's going to take you a minute. Then you probably got to let them rise or rest again for an hour, maybe 2 hours, kind of depends on the bread. And then you got to bake it, okay? Now, even if it only takes you an hour to bake it, you probably don't have those fancy ovens that they have in some bakeries. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're kind of like shelves. It's a big, tall oven, and it's got all these shelves. The best example of where I think I see it all the time is in bagel places. And, those can bake, several dozen baked goods at one time, right? That's why they have them, because that's what they do. But you probably don't have that as a restaurant. So you probably have a restaurant oven, which is bigger than the kind of one you probably have at home, but not by that much, okay? So maybe you can only fit 2 dozen rolls in there at a time, right? So now you got several rounds, 4 rounds of baking you have to do. That's another 4 hours, okay? So just on that alone, you're looking at 6 hours of labor for rolls that you will need for your lunch service, okay? Now, granted, during the rising process and stuff, you could be doing other things, but you got a lot of other crap to do too as a chef. So if you don't have someone that's solely dedicated to making bread, that takes up several hours, 6 hours of labor for you just to be ready for your lunch service. That's a lot to do, okay? Now, plenty of big fancy restaurants have people. That's their only job, is to make bread there, okay? Or make the pastries or make ice cream, right? And those places are great. You do pay a premium at those places. They're very expensive, but it's a great thing to have. It's a wonderful thing to contribute to your restaurant and to bring to your guests. But most restaurants can't afford to do that, okay? To hire somebody just to make bread is hugely expensive, right? So what most places do is they have a bakery that they call and say, hey, I need 3 dozen rolls for tomorrow. And they go, I got you. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, they drop off your rolls. It achieves the same goal. at the end of the day. At the end of the day, whether you make it in your in-house or you have a bakery deliver it, your customer gets freshly baked bread when they join you for lunch or they join you for dinner. And that's a good thing, right? I like to say, you have to know when somebody just does it better than you, right? So even though you may be a wonderfully talented chef, right, you have to think to yourself at some point, do I really want to be putting in 6 hours of labor to make bread when I know there's a bakery down the street that does a way better job making bread than me, and they're reasonably priced, and it just would make more sense if I just ordered it? Or do I want to hire somebody in to make it? You just need to know when someone really does it better than you. And it's usually a very nice quality product. If you're getting it from a high quality bakery, it's a great roll. It's great bread. There's no shame in that, There really is. I want to really push this idea that there's no stigma in doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean the restaurant is ripping you off or it's a lower quality place. Plenty of high quality places do that, and they use very high quality bakers to provide these products. Same thing with like desserts, gelatos, sorbets, something like that. You may see on Chopped, like they throw in ice cream into the ice cream maker and 20 minutes later they have ice cream. That's really convenient if you have to make 2 scoops of ice cream. But if you're producing 3 gallons and maybe 3 different types of ice cream, hugely labor intensive. Again, you probably would need somebody who's dedicated to doing something like that and doing desserts more broadly. But, plenty of restaurants, they will order ice creams or gelatos from an artisanal ice cream shop or something like that. Same thing with any kind of pastry or pie crust or something like that. They might order that out. And again, there's no stigma in that. And plenty of places will even, they might order a sorbet from somewhere, but they take it and they do their own thing to it. They add it to a dessert they already have. And again, there's no shame in that whatsoever. You have to know when someone just does it better than you. And you always have to be thinking about, is the end result something better for my customer that they will come back and say, wow, that was a really great experience? Or is it not? Because the customer doesn't care if you made the sorbet in-house. They care if it was good, right? And if it's trash, they're gonna be like, oh, that wasn't really worth my money. There's, you know what I mean? There's no pro to you making it in-house if it's not good. Because then people just be like, oh, the place just wasn't good. I will say that there are also a lot of distributors, big name ones that are kind of I think of them kind of like the Amazon of food distribution. They're, nationwide, and they're kind of like the generic place you get food from. And they sell a ton of pre-made and not in a good way kind of stuff. You can get pretty much anything pre-made from these places. And I'm kind of convinced that's why all diner burgers taste exactly the same. I'm kind of convinced that's why diner food always tastes the same no matter what diner it is. And there's no shame in that if you're a diner, but just know that if you go somewhere and it tastes like diner food, it's because it's probably exactly the same product, comes out of the same packaging, and comes from the same distributor. Anyway, so that's also kind of why when I watch Kitchen Nightmares sometimes, I'm like, I think people are shocked when they watch Kitchen Nightmares. It's you just buy that? You can just buy that? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, a lot of restaurants don't because it's gross, but there are places that they get away with just buying all pre-made kind of things and reheating it and selling it to you, and you buy it and you eat it and you think it's good. I don't want to make anybody paranoid about that, but that is a thing that can be done. So anyway, going back to these supply chains. So there's no shame in doing something like that for your guests in terms of desserts or bread or even just little things here and there. There's no shame in kind of incorporating that into your menu. But now think about it in light of COVID, right? So all restaurants and all businesses are really struggling. One of the reasons restaurants are struggling so much is because our prices to bring in ingredients has gone up, right? So bring back your supply and demand. Okay, we're going to be using a little bit of Econ 101, supply and demand. Okay, if you're not familiar, look it up. I can't explain it. I'm not good at it. But so let's think now. So you're a bakery, right? Your prices have gone up to get flour, to get butter, to get yeast, whatever you need. Your prices have gone up. So now the restaurant that you provide rolls to, maybe normally they only order 24 rolls, but that doesn't make sense for you anymore to provide them that. You lose money on giving them only 24 rolls. You need to be making a certain amount to make it worth the cost you put into it. So now you tell all your restaurant clients, listen, I know you normally buy 24 rolls from me. You need to buy 6 rolls now at minimum. Okay, so you're a restaurant and you're like, shoot, I'm never going to be able to go through 5 dozen rolls in a dinner service. Why? Because you now are only doing outdoor dining, which, depending on the restaurant, you may not have at all the capacity outdoors that you used to have indoors. You may only be able to do like 30 people where you used to be able to do 60, right? So now your demand has gone way down, and you probably aren't as busy as you used to be. So your demand has gone way down, but your price has just gone way up. Like your cost of supplies has just gone up by a lot. You now are like double. So it would cost you twice as much to produce the same plate of bread you used to for your customers, but now you have half as many customers. So the only way you can continue to provide bread and still be at the capacity you are without moving indoors or, renting a space to have more customers is by jacking up your prices. And I know this seems kind of superficial when you use the bread when you use bread as an example, right? Because it's like, well, is anybody really jacking up their prices because bread price has gone up? No. Not just because their bread prices have gone up. Now remember that this is probably happening in some way, shape, or form with every ingredient you bring into the restaurant, right? So your meat distributor might be like, listen, I know you used to buy 2 cases of chicken. You need to buy 4 for it to make sense for us, or else, we can't send anything to you. You need to buy, 3 cases of gelato now for it to make sense for us. So your prices have gone up hugely in almost every aspect. So every plate of food you used to produce at, a certain price or a certain cost now costs you twice as much. So you need to raise your prices in order to be profitable at a lower capacity, because your demand has gone down because you can't seat as many people. And a lot of people just don't want to dine out right now. A lot of people just aren't comfortable going out to restaurants. So that's why a lot of prices are increasing. It's not just because places are being greedy. It's really a survival thing, right? And in addition to that, so think about the bread example again. You've just been told by your bakery you need to bring in 5 dozen rolls in order for them to sell to you at all. But you're only going to use 2 dozen at dinner service, and you're not, because you're a restaurant who doesn't believe in serving people stale bread, you're like, well, I'm not going to just keep those rolls until, the next day and serve them again, and I'll be good for 2 days. No, you don't want to do that. So now your waste has gone up significantly, and waste is a huge problem in restaurants. Restaurants lose so much money by being wasteful with food. When you order more than you need and you don't use it and you don't sell it, you are losing a ton of money. You're throwing out money, right? So you may say, listen, I'm going to have 3 dozen rolls I don't know what to do with, right? Now, this is where a good chef will get creative and say, I'm going to turn it into breadcrumbs. I'm going to turn them into croutons for salads. I'm going to turn it into bread pudding. I'm going to do whatever I can to get my money out of those extra 3 dozen rolls. Now, 3 dozen rolls is a lot to just like throw on your menu. Suddenly everything's going to be covered in breadcrumbs and there's only going to be bread pudding on the dessert menu. But it's what you have to do for it to make sense, for you to continue to provide bread for your customers in this case, to make it worth bringing in all that bread. Welcome to the bread bank. Yeah, I think a lot of people might see this as kind of, they might see the downstream effects of this as like restaurants are raising their prices but lowering their quality of product. Like I've seen some people who asked, we used to serve butter with our bread, and a lot of people have asked me for butter, and I've said, I'm sorry, we don't have any available for table service. And they don't really get what I mean by that. Like one person kind of said to me, you mean you have no butter in the restaurant? I'm like, no, it's not that I have no butter in the restaurant. It's that the butter we've brought in was for cooking purposes, right? Which, yeah, it's pretty much the same butter that you get. Actually, I think we put salted butter on the tables and unsalted butter in the food, but whatever. I don't know if we actually put salted butter out on the tables. I never get to eat it. But again, A, it's different butter. But B, do you know how much butter we used to have to just bring in just for table service? Like a couple pounds, like for just like a couple days. That's a lot of freaking butter. And the price of butter has gone up exponentially. It's why even in a lot of the dishes we're making, a lot of the soups we're making dairy free so that we can use something cheaper instead of butter, because it's so expensive right now to put in. So when you ask me for butter and I say, no, I don't have any available for table service, it's not that there's no butter in house. It's that if I give you butter, I kind of have to give everybody butter. And that's just going to be too expensive, In another time, not COVID related, plenty of restaurants would, save butter, clarify it, reuse it for something else. But we can't do that because that's definitely not okay by CDC guidelines. Not that the CDC even knows that that's a thing that happens, but we can't do that anymore. So now we get, for, a couple tablespoons of butter that we give you when we bring you bread, we're wasting it if you don't finish it. Even if you do finish it, we're giving that away for free. We don't charge you for that. We make no money off of the couple pounds of butter we bring in. And now those pounds just went up 25% in cost. That is a huge loss of money that we cannot afford to do anymore. That is a luxury that a lot of restaurants cannot afford to do. And it depends on your priorities, obviously. You know, a certain restaurant may feel like that's really important that we keep that. And again, I'm step away from the bread example for a second. They may feel like it's really important to us that we keep this ingredient or this dish on the menu. So even though it's a greater cost, we do want to continue to provide it. So it's fine. We'll eat that and we'll deal with it because it matters to us. Maybe it matters for the brand of your restaurant or the reputation or something like that. But with something like bread that's like so superficial, right? It's like, no, it's not worth it, right? I would rather put that money that I would have spent on butter for your bread, I would rather put it towards, you know, being able to continue to get the same quality of beef short ribs that I always used to, or being able to get the same quality of, you know, high quality olive oil or something like that, or being able to get freshly made pasta. I would rather put that money towards something else that really matters, that will improve your experience than just having butter on the table. And that's something I think people don't get, you know? Since everything went up, you know, adjustments had to be made to keep some things at their high quality. And so, you know what? Yeah, some things had to go. Dessert menus had to shrink. You know, entree menus even had to shrink. Things had to be cut. And that's because there's an overall quality we're trying to maintain. And we're taking away from things that, you know, aren't as important. If bread and butter is the most important part of your dining experience, I empathize. Just buy butter, you know, just buy butter and soften it and add a little salt to it and eat it at home. Totally better experience, way less money. 10 out of 10 recommend. I do it all the time. But I like to think, you know, we're providing a nice like herbed olive oil, and I like to think that's kind of an improvement. It's particularly delicious with the new kind of bread that we're serving, and I like it. I mean, listen, I'm a big fan of butter. Don't get me wrong. I would also enjoy butter with it, but I don't think I would even notice the difference, you know? So anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say today on that. I know that it's very complicated. I know that it's kind of intricate, and I know that it can feel like, as a person who I used to go to this restaurant and they used to do this and now they don't do that anymore, but their prices increased, they're cheaping me out, they're ripping me off. But I just want you to understand it's not about that. It's a miracle that we can still provide the same quality of a dining experience that we used to, even though it's at a slightly higher cost. Because, I mean, I've been looking around. Every restaurant I know, their prices have jumped significantly because that's just what they need to do to make ends meet. But it's not because they're ripping you off. It's because prices have changed on the back end of things that they have no control over, right? So you continuing to pay, even at a slightly higher price, is what it takes just to maintain profitability and to survive. I mean, it's not even about profitability at this point for a lot of restaurants. It's just about survival. You know, they're barely making ends meet as is. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in to the Family Meal Podcast. Please remember to be kind to your service staff workers and continue to go out and support the restaurants that you know and love. They need you, they appreciate you, and they love it when you don't complain about a price increase because you're just happy with the quality that they produce. That's all for now. I will see you in the next one. See you later.